everybody. I hope this is not on the live or the recording. I'm going to do seat work. If you're a person, step up. This is right there. It'll be like, what's the right word for this? For someone who puts people in seats. Usher, yes. One person. Why not? Okay. But that's the seat right there? Open seat right there? Hi. Right in there. Not that first one. That's dangerous. The second one in there. You, okay. What? Okay. Seat? Seat? I know people want seats. 2 seats? Yeah, good work. Looking forward to your lecture.
Thank you, Carl. That was really helpful. Okay, with that, good evening, everyone. Welcome you all to the first public lecture of the 60th academic year at the College of Architecture and Design. I'm Katie Danzhang. I'm Associate Professor of Architecture, and I'm here today representing the Programming Committee, which consists of Carlos Stradel, Faye Nixon, and myself. Our lecture series in the fall is made possible through the generous support of the Robert B. Church III Memorial Lecture Fund and the AIA of East Tennessee. I'd like to begin by thanking Dean Jason Young for his vision and ongoing support of this work. And behind each lecture is a long list of people who make it actually happen. Thank you to our communications team, Lindsay McBee, Baxter Stoltz, and Ann McBee, as well as many of the staff members in the college who helped us keeping everything running smoothly. And if everything turns out seamlessly tonight, that's thanks to Daniel Lewandowski, our tireless special event coordinator, who sits back there. The visual identity of this year, the posters and animations, comes from Becca LoveG Studio, a Los Angeles-based design practice. And also, I want to give a special shout out to our former committee member, Julie Kress. Thank you, Julie, for helping us shaping this year's programming in the college. Tonight marks the beginning of a year of conversations around the theme, historically barriers and barriers historically. 2 words that appeared on the words to avoid list earlier this year. Apparently, when pursuing federal grants, they can be seen as something of a tell. And therefore, researchers have been recommended to avoid them, along with words like women and black. Along, these would seem to be unambiguously apolitical, the stuff of truth and reality. Hello? Can you hear me? We could easily find other words to use, but we insist on the availability of these. Historically, there have been barriers, and barriers historically have been manifest as element of architecture and design. We inhibit air, ink, access, form, and weather to define space, create community, contain events, enable progress, print graphics, and protect humanity. What could possibly go wrong? It is my great honor to introduce you to tonight's speaker, Dr. Behnaz Farahi, whose work probes historical social challenges through looking into the future. Her projects address critical issues such as feminism, emotion, bodily perception, and social interaction, and fosters empathetic relationships between the human body and its surrounding environment. From tracking gaze on garment to projected eyes looking up to the stars, Questions about the observer and the observed are manifest as surreal objects and scenes through materials that present lifelike behaviors. Behnaz is currently an assistant professor at the MIT Media Lab, which she joined in September 2024. She was recently named one of the 3 inaugural Morningside Academy of Design professorship at MIT, which recognize outstanding faculty whose teaching, research, and service have significantly shaped the field of design. She is an internationally renowned designer and critical maker, a recipient of numerous awards, including the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum Digital Design Award, Innovation by Design Fast Company Award, and the World Technology Award. Her projects that fuse fashion, architecture, and interactive design have been selected as permanent collections of the Museum of the Science and Industry in Chicago and have been exhibited at many internationally influential platforms. She has co-edited books including Interactive Design Towards a Responsive Environment in 2023 and 3 Printed Body Architecture in 2017. At the MIT Media Lab, Behnaz leads the Critical Matter group. The research group draws upon emerging technologies and morphological and behavioral principles inspired by natural systems to spark imagination, provoke conversation, enhance perception, augment social interaction, and empower voices that have not been heard. All of these aim to look beyond technology as merely applications, instead to reintegrate the tradition of critical thinking in philosophy and social sciences with the concerns of matter in science and technology. I have followed Behnaz's work for many years, and it has profoundly changed my perceptions of a lot of things. No doubt that her work is technologically inspirational and visually stunning. As Kent Larson, professor at MIT Media Lab, once described it as unique and surprising. Unique in a way, it forges unlikely connections across disciplines, materials, and ideas that shouldn't coexist but somehow do. And surprising as if they are taking us to another place. And to me, the beauty of Behnaz's work lies in this tension, a strangeness that unsettles while sparking wonder, always pushing us towards another question, another story, another hidden layer of critical matter waiting to be revealed. And now, it's time to kick off another year of lectures. Please remain welcoming Behnaz Farahi.
Thank you so much. Do you hear me okay? Great. Thank you so much, Carrie. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I am so delighted to meet all of you, and thank you, Kathy, for the wonderful hospitality. I do need to unshare and share back. For some reason, I do not see my notes. Apologies for that. There you go. So I would like to start by asking a few questions. And maybe firstly, what is the role of design and architecture and technology in our societies? Is it to simply create or make cozy and beautiful objects and environments? Or can we use design and architecture and technology to ask critical questions? Because I believe that design, it shouldn't just be to solve problems, but to ask questions and challenge dominant outlooks. Not to just build future, but to imagine it differently. Thank you, Kathy, for the wonderful introduction. As Kathy mentioned, I am teaching at MIT, where I lead the Critical Matter Research Group. We work across the design scales, from the intimate scales of fashion and wearable, all the way to architecture, and today to public art installations. We really envision a future for design and technology that goes beyond just mere application of technology, because technology is cool, we have to use it, but we want to use technology to address and use it in a more critical and meaningful way, to to spark imaginations, provoke conversation, and hopefully to empower voices that have not been heard. So I would like to start a little with saying a few words about critical matter, and then I will present some of the work that I've done in the last few years. So the name of our group is Critical Matter. It has double meaning. It refers to both important material research, but it also addresses larger critical issues of our time. Conventionally, most material research is being informed by advances in technology and engineering and science. A lot of time, they're addressing the question of efficiency. And a lot of time, these approaches are disconnected from social sciences and humanities. At Critical Matter Group, we are very excited to really see that how we can do innovative work that is grounded in scientific context while we're making meaningful social impact. Our starting point is the body. It is fascinating to observe how mere matter or material can give rise to both conscious and non-conscious forms of living behaviors. If you're looking at the brain, you can see it's a material, it's a matter, but yet it gives rise to consciousness, which is fascinating to observe. We're constantly fascinated by these dualities that have been in the history, from mind versus body, culture versus nature, thinking versus feeling, critical versus matter. We are looking at these dualities while matter grounds us in the body, feeling engage in mind. One is somatic, the other is semantic. One belongs to nature, the other is to culture. And in critical matter, what we are excited is by bringing these dualities together. So critical matter insists on these dualities to bring them both together further. Nature is fascinating. It's a huge inspiration in our work, not only in terms of intelligence and its form, which is obviously very beautiful to even watch, but also in terms of its intelligence in responding to both internal as well as external stimuli. Again, here we are seeing how materials and intelligence are merged together to create these beautiful behaviors. I started exploring the production of what I called emotive environments through a series of projects ranging from intimate scale of wearable, but also to architectural scale. I explored how materials of the environments can be soft, interactive, reconfigurable in order to create new relationships between the human body and the built environments. The goal was to create these very intuitive interactions where one can inform the other. These materials, most of the time, they're equipped with AI, sensors, various type of actuation systems that allow these systems to interact with human bodily movements. For instance, this is a robotic ceiling installation, which was part of a research at USC sponsored by a Steelcase company to explore the future of the built environments. I was fascinated by these reciprocal relationships between the human activity, human bodily movement, and the shape of the environment, where one can inform the other. So your action changed the shape of the environment changed your action. But these ideas didn't stay in the world of architecture. I soon was fascinated to see how these interactive technologies could populate around the human body to influence our perceptions, extend our intelligence, or affect our social interactions. This is a neuromorphic helmet that responds to the brain activity of the wearer. So as the wearer thinks more, the helmet opens up, and as the attention level decreases, the helmet closes down and creates a cocoon around the head. There are 4 concerns that inform our design practice: new materials, sensory technologies, robotics, and critical design. And I hope to unpack that during this presentation. In terms of new materials, we are very excited to develop new materials using 3D printing, robotic fabrication, and algorithmic design tools, inspired by natural systems such as feather, hair, and fish scale systems that varies their properties across the surface from soft to hard, from porous to very dense. We can develop materials that they change their variety of properties across the surface. These materials can be soft and flexible when it needs to be, and they can also be active instead of passive in response to their surrounding environments. A lot of times we use variety of mechanisms such as auxetic structures, pneumatic systems, shape memory alloy or smart materials to allow these materials to show lifelike behaviors, not dissimilar to our muscle systems. But how can we give these materials a sense that they can sense their environments? I've been working with various sensory technologies, including biometric sensors such as brain-computer interface, known as EEG, to various facial and gaze tracking technologies to explore whether these systems can recognize our emotions by detecting or analyzing our physiological responses. The reality is our body responds with various physiological responses. So various sensors can pick up different information from under our skins or outside our skin. What if our wearable could extend our sensory experience of the world? What if it could become non-verbal communication expressing through color and texture change? This piece is inspired by hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are amazing creatures. They change the color of their feather with the twist of their head. They go from dark green to magenta with the twist of their head. So this project was commissioned by Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. We were fascinated to see how we can produce materials that not only change color, but also change shape. So creating this piece included basically the design of these electromagnetic actuators that we decided to build in-house. This decision in the beginning was very simple. We thought that, oh, we're going to make these in-house, 250 of these actuators. They're simple mechanisms that they basically flip from one side to another. And each of these modules, they're holding color-changing material, and by twisting the angle, we can see the color change. This decision in the beginning was a very simple decision, but actually it went through a long process of prototyping and iteration and experimentation with these electromagnetic actuators to make sure that these modules, they can lift up the weight of each of these petals. So it was an incredible process of fine-tuning these actuators. Conceptually, this process engages with the notion of sensory substitution, in which sensory substitution is a concept from neuroscience, in which one sensory input has been replaced with another. For instance, seeing through haptic. And you can see the best example of sensory substitution in blind people, where they're sensing the world around through haptic pressure. Back to actuations, you can see each of these modules, the components that they built. They're one copper coil and magnet inside, so you can look at electromagnetic actuators, and we decided to build this completely from scratch. So it was 250 actuators, 40 electrical driver boards, 2 microcontrollers, 1 camera. All of these were embedded inside the piece. And it was hours of soldering, which I didn't anticipate in the first place, but it was incredible amounts of soldering, which was absolutely a marathon of soldering. So it was really interesting to just go through this journey of making this piece happen. But our goal was to create something that it can work on a daily basis in the museum from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I still sometimes have people that they go to the museum, take a video, and tag me, and it's so wonderful to see that the piece is still working. So inside the piece, there is a small camera. The camera can see the people around. It can recognize the faces and the facial expressions. It can also understand where people are standing compared to the wearer. So if it recognizes the person in front, if it's happy, it creates a very soothing ripple of movements. When it recognizes you're angry or you're frowning, it generates a very fast movement to repel you from getting closer to the piece. We are exploring robotics and use of industrial robotic arms, not only for human-robot interaction, which is really fascinating, and the use of robots as collaborator or autonomous agents, but also we are very much interested in using robots for custom-made robotic fabrication, for producing either novel forms, novel materials, biodegradable materials using these robotic tools. As Kathy mentioned, we co-edited 2 books, 3D printed body architecture and one on interactive design. And currently I'm writing my monograph on emotive environments, which I hope it comes out in early 2026. But for the remaining part of this talk, I want to talk about the critical aspects of the work. I've been really fascinated by the idea of the gaze for the last few years now, from both as cognitive perspective, but also from critical feminist perspective. What happened when we return the gaze? What does it mean to observe and to be observed? And how is power negotiated through the act of looking? What if you could feel someone gaze on your body? So Crest of the Gaze is a 3D printed cape that responds to the onlooker's gaze. So it has a very small camera that it can see the onlooker's gaze. It can understand where the onlooker is looking. And based on where the onlooker is looking, it moves accordingly. So basically, if you're the wearer, you know which part of your body is being looked at because you notice the movement on your body. And if you're an onlooker, you know that your action has been noticed because you see the movements. So it potentially changed the social interactions. Intriguing historical masks worn by Bandari women from southern part of Iran. Legend has been said that these masks, they were developed during the Portuguese colonial rule as a way of protecting the wearer from the gaze of a slave master looking for attractive women. So while these Iranian masks cover most of the face except the eyes, I've been really wondering how eyes could become a vehicle for communication. And then I came across this fascinating incident in which American officer Admiral Jeremiah Denton, using blinking to send secret message. In this video, you're seeing he's sending the word torture using the Morse code during his captivity in Vietnam. So that was a huge inspiration, and I was really fascinated by this story, how eyes could be used for communication. And then I was also inspired by a recent one of the experiments in Facebook AI Lab, where they basically wanted to have two bots to negotiate with one another. During these experiments, the bots started to formulate a language. They're repeating words. No one could understand what they're doing. So the scientists were very uncomfortable, and they tweaked the algorithms to make sure this is not happening. So this story reveals how knowledge is also power, and the inability to understand would unnerve those that want to maintain their authority. So with all these layers together, I really wanted to create these robotic masks that they basically using the eyelashes for communication. So each mask consists of 18 eyelashes. They're blinking their eyelashes in rapid successions using AI-generated Morse code, and they can send and receive messages between these women. The aim is really to sow anxiety within this patriarchal system by developing a new type of language, a non-verbal language, that probably unnerves a patriarchal oppressor and hopefully give voice to this marginalized community. So let's talk about fashion. I was approached by a fashion house to do an installation for a runway show during the Milan Fashion Week. Fashion is an important medium for production of culture, yet fashion industry has been complicit within the tradition of female objectification and sexual harassment. Women's body were regularly or are regularly objectified within the fashion industry. And women have to basically absorb this condition as a form of internalized male gaze. So when I was approached by to do this installation for the runway show, I was wondering if we could subvert this dynamic, if we could subvert this through the power of the gaze. So Returning the Gaze is a robotic installation which is an exploration of this scenario. Basically, in the center of the installation, there's a female model who's wearing a space-like suit. The helmet consists of two very small digital cameras that track and stream her eyes to 4 industrial robotic arms. So the gaze of the model is basically directed back to the audience or to the viewers, make them to feel uncanny by being watched. So it's really, the hope is to make sure that the audience feel uncanny by being watched and make us be more aware of our disturbing biases that is so rooted within our subconsciousness. it's about the tragic stories of protesters from Iran who got permanently blinded as they shot in the eye by the military forces using rubber bullets. And soon I realized this story happened all around the world, in India, in Hong Kong, in Chile, in the US, actually after George Floyd. Despite the fact that these protesters were often peaceful, their nonviolent means of political expressions was perceived as violence or riot by the authorities. And this was really disturbing. I decided to make an immersive art installation which uses the victim's eyes and their words to address the importance of nonviolent means of political expressions and holding the authorities accountable for their violent action. So this immersive installation is 5 minutes experience where people enter to the room. You're going to see the very short excerpts of the video. And there are some close-up recording of eyes that they're shedding black tears. And then within some of those eyes, there are words of the victims that appears.
El patriarcado es un juez. Acusa por nacer.
Back up, and that way.
Now, I know this last project was very intense, so I want to invite you to all to take a deep breath and let yourself settle. And I want you to think about your life. What do you dream of becoming? What are you longing for? What have you been feeling lately? And lastly, what are you unwilling to feel? What if public buildings could share our dreams and fears? So here I'm excited to share one of our latest projects, Gaze to the Star. Gaze to the Star is a large-scale public art project that transformed the iconic MIT Great Dome into emotional interface, into a living canvas that shares dreams, fears, and longing of the community. So we designed an immersive AI-powered pod, which is this object, where we captured 200 people's stories and their eyes and their inner words. Their story about longing, about their struggles, about their stress.
I'm so excited. I'm proposing to my girlfriend of 6 years.
I find myself lost here, where everyone seemed to grasp things instantly, while I struggled to keep up.
I finally got the congratulations out of it.
For 6 months.
I'm so happy.
Hundreds of jobs, lots of ghosting.
I yearn to move my leg freely again.
24 facing terminal cancer.
I long for my hometown to be free from war,
fear my
and for
existence
my family
and its
to live
loss
in peace
won't matter.
without fear.
I wish I could travel back to
When I retire,
can fight anything life throws my way.
My dream is to become an aerospace engineer.
So when you enter to this sensory pod, you first check in. You sign a consent form. Our team basically guides you. And then you enter to the pod. You take a seat, and you lean your forehead against this piece. Then you also look inside, and inside there's an infinity room. Inside the infinity room, there is a small microscope that captures your eye. And you have a conversation with AI. You also will be given 4 themes: longing, dreaming, struggle, and emotions. So the AI asks you, what are you longing for? Or what are you dream of becoming? As you answer, the AI answer you back to basically better understand the underlying story behind your answer. So as the conversation builds, we capture the close-up of your conversation with the system. We capture the transcriptions of your conversation. We turn the transcriptions of your conversation to 10 to 12 words letters. We summarize it. And then we encode that as a Braille message inside your iris. And during March 12, 13, 14th, we basically turned the MIT Dome to a storytelling vehicle to project these 200 eyes and their stories to the dome. Here, the dome at MIT, which is a symbol of power for the community, instead of being symbol of the institution, now it's became a tool for empowering the community to share their stories. Not the stories of success, a shiny story of success and happiness, but the stories of longing and loss and pain and stress. So as people walk in the city, they see these giant eyes. You could spot it from Boston, not only in Cambridge. So you can see it from across the river. And they look at these giant eyes. They might get curious, and they can go to the websites where they can decode the hidden messages behind each eye. Kind of like figuring out the meaning behind the constellations in the night sky. But I want to take some time here and talk about that perhaps we can make a comparison between this experience where someone lean their forehead against a piece to have this conversation with AI, to experience of the confessional, where the Catholics confess their sins to the priest hidden behind the screen, or the psychoanalyst couch, where patients reveal their most hidden desires. So this sensory pod invites participants to share their aspirations and fear using AI. We train this system based on meditation teachers, so it's very soothing, it invites you to share. But then we really use this design to also question and wonder, what does it mean to trust machine with the most vulnerable parts of our lives? Could we, or could design and AI offer us new ways to understand our inner life? Could it help us to become a better version of ourselves, to self-reflect, to grow, to become more aware of ourselves? And beyond the question of self, could it help us to foster global empathy if we understand the pain of other peoples around us? So this project raised a lot of questions related to ethical and emotional questions of AI and storytelling for us. I also want to take a moment and say that this project was incredible. It was our first big project for the group. We were a group of 14 students, undergrad, grad, and some visiting students from Harvard. They were part of the team. We designed and fabricated these pods, as you can see inside the pod, to the surrounding of the environments, to create this space where people are welcome, people feel safe, people activated with all of their senses, not only just visual, but also there was a fog machine where we fill the space with fog to create a dreamlike space, to the sound. To all of these, we were very much thinking that how can we create a space that it's not just a chatbot on your browser, but actually a space that activates your senses. In terms of AI, we used segmentation to detect the iris and pupil location in every given eye for all of these 200 eyes that we captured in order to be able to encode their messages inside their iris. Obviously, the computational aspects of this work required so much work in terms of making sure that all of these happen automatically, so we are not doing it one by one, but we developed a system where it pulls from people locations, iris information, the transcriptions of their conversation, and then produce all these encoded messages inside the iris. And then this is one of the first times that we put the eyes on the dome. So it was an incredible to really process and journey with the whole team to see how from different fields and different disciplines we can come together to create this vision a reality. We also realized that during the interaction design for this piece, from the design of the interaction with our sensory pod, we use anthropomorphism to really give this pod a sort of character. In this case, the pod, you hear the voice of 109 years old woman who invites you to reflect, to soothe you, and then after that you hear some voices. So here, the question of anthropomorphism helped us a lot because you kind of trust that there is another being there, so you open up to share your moments. But also we noticed that by projecting these eyes into the dome, we are anthropomorphizing the architecture. The architecture become a body itself. The form of the dome is like an eyeball, and by giving, like literally projecting eyes on the dome, the entire building became alive. Moreover, one aspect of projects which we were very excited about was the data visualization, to find the common patterns between all of these stories. We captured 200 stories, but what was common between them was something that we run through AI system to find this commonality, the threads that basically start to emerge between all these stories. And some of these threads are you can find on the websites, from community to academic stress to travel, start to emerge as patterns that community are talking about it. So I encourage you all to go to our website to check out the visualizations to find these common collective patterns that start to emerge. This project wasn't just about one person interaction with AI. We collected 200 stories. But beneath these 200 stories and using architecture as a canvas for sharing all this emotional information, the collective empathy emerged. There is something that starts to shape, that connect us all together. The patterns that start to emerge, it was a collective empathy that we didn't really plan it in advance, but it start emerging from the community. And that was an interesting moment. So perhaps the finishing thoughts. In our work, we ask, what if public architecture could listen to us? What if media and architecture is not just about data, but about dreams and fears? Technology is not just about precision and efficiency. It's about presence. It's about feeling seen. So design and architecture can help us not to be effective, but perhaps affective and potentially more human. So I'm excited to see how the computational design and technology can be used to address larger issues of our times, either social, cultural, environmental, and political challenges of our time, not to merely conform, but to ask, to provoke, to empower, to reimagine a transformative future. Technology is affecting us, and how we are affected shape how we see the words. And I would love to finish by this beautiful saying, we don't see the words as they are, we see them as we are. Thank you so much.
Can we maybe open the audience for some questions? Just a reminder, so that online can also hear the discussion.
So my question is about the eyelash mask, which first of all is probably the coolest thing I've seen in a really long time. So thank you for creating that. But my question is, at what point does AI essentially replace the patriarchy in giving a voice over women in an attempt to, I guess, create a community for women? Like, where do you think this project might go too far, and how might you kind of adjust that so it continues with your vision?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, I would be very cautious to say AI is completely resisting patriarchy in of itself. Like, it really question of how are we using it, where are we using it, in which context, for whom are we using it, right? So in this case, in this project, we were using a Morse code and Markov chain for, it was almost very much detecting what is the letter after a letter, what is the probability of one letter go after another, right? Which is a prediction model. I mean, in of itself is really fascinating how AI can predict, and how the predictive perception works in general is something that we are very, very interested. But I would be very cautious for making any statements that AI can be used as a blanket, as a general blanket, that, oh, it can be used to empower these women. I don't want to make such statements, and I'd be very cautious. And there is a lot of, these days especially, a lot of conversation like that, that either they see a good side of AI or horrible sides of AI. Either AI is going to take our jobs and we're going to be all jobless, or on the other hand, AI is amazing, it's augmenting us in these ways. And I just think that the issue is more nuanced, and we should be very nuanced about it. And there is no way that we can say that it's absolutely gonna empower these women. Yes, if it's been a big corporate who is benefiting from these devices and giving them to this, it's become the question of governance and control. So it's like, in which context we are talking about these technological devices, it's become always a question. So I have no answer. I mean, I think your question is very important, but I also think that the question of any technological advancement, it's so nuanced, and we have to avoid to saying that this is going to resolve that issue altogether. This is one example in which I speculate that we can empower communities, or AI and could be used for empowering the communities, that they have been given less voice, they've been suppressed. So how could we see in a different context? So AI is not just for certain group, but it can be applied or repurposed for a different group that they're marginalized or they're historically underrepresented. But thank you for the question. We have two here.
Hello. Oh. I am just going to piggyback off of the student's question, which was a really good one, and maybe just ask for a little more specificity, because I think you're very clearly a smart and capable lady and working at an amazing institution, but there are some smart people in this room too, a lot of smart people in this room, and I'd like to maybe tighten our conversation around AI a little bit, like tighten it up. So for the AI that you're using, and actually all of your, a lot of the projects where you're using AI, I'm curious if you are using a certain model, or if it's a proprietary in-house sandbox. Is it connected to the internet? Is it sending and sharing data? Or are you kind of, for example, with this project here, keeping the data in-house? And maybe students who are thinking about AI and asking questions around AI, you can maybe listen to her answer and begin to think about how you might use AI in a way that either shares and is open, or is proprietary and closed, and maybe the implications of that.
Thank you for your question. I think every project is different, but as you asked about this last project, let me explain. I mean, it was very important to be extremely clear with participants. That's why we had this whole checking area and consent form, where we are articulating what information we capture from you, so they know that, okay, these are the information we capture. We are not recording your voice, so you can say anything, but we are capturing the transcriptions of your conversation. We also were very clear that we are recording the close-up of your iris. So some people, for instance, we had the chief technology officer from Obama administration visiting, and she was like, I can't do that because this is my biometric data, I can't. So people were very clear, some people cannot do that, and that was very fair. Like, we wanted to make sure we are very transparent about it. And also we used OpenAI for the conversation. So we, in our consent form and also in our reception, we were very much clear about what are we capturing from you, how are we processing it, and the parts that it was, for instance, OpenAI, we could remove the identification of like, what's your email address, what's your name, completely, it's anonymized, but yet we are using OpenAI. So this conversation was used OpenAI, and it was going to that. So we were very clear about those, but the parts that we could anonymize, we did our best to remove any names. In fact, if you didn't want to give your name, we were having the system, so we give ID, a number, so you could look up your iVideo on the website, but not necessarily your name is shared. So we were trying to be very careful about all this, because I think when we are talking about, this was the first time that we were working with 200 people, 200 data, and all of a sudden it was a different way of addressing this. It wasn't just one person, it was 200 people's stories, so we were feeling accountable for like, how are we gonna handle this? So it was a experiment in which we realized that, wow, this is very, very important, how we handle data. Do we erase them after? How do we remove all the names and email address from this and store it somewhere else locally, not on the cloud? So these are very important, very much important questions.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your talk. It's stimulating, mesmerizing, and dazzling to me. I think for me, I have a sort of question that is related to the tension between discreteness and continuity. So I work with actuator too, but as a historian of actuators, like my conclusion was that historically is that buildings have already been populated with actuators. And what they're doing is they're communicating, they're transforming ideas into materials, which is, to some extent, your definition of critical matter. And I've noticed that with the sensors, it is turning emotion. To me, we might understand emotions as continuous fluid modes of beings, but it's capturing the states. It's giving a definition of different visual expressions. So turning a continuity into a discrete kind of mechanic understanding. And we also see the movement of eyes, which is, again, a continuous, ambiguous kind of way of like we embodying this organ into blinks that resembles Morse code. So I'm curious about your understanding of these two. Like discrete state machines are the hallmark of the digital culture, and I'm curious if, like, what do you think about this tension, and do you think there might be anything lost in turning continuity into states, and what's your thoughts?
Thank you so much. That was a really brilliant question. I think you're right that there are these tensions between discrete emotions, which is a lot of the history of affective computing, from Paul Ekman's facial expression tracking, 6 basic emotions: anger, frustration, and happiness, and sadness, and disgust, and surprise, things like that. It's like very much discrete emotions versus how many of us feel like we're waking up and you're feeling a little sad, and just in half an hour you're feeling like happy and you're feeling energized in another 15 minutes. So it's like these palettes of emotions like washing through your day, right? It's almost like you're adding little colors and become different hue of colors. So you're right to point out this tension, and maybe back to previous questions, which is like what models you use. Some of these models are based on a lot of time like affective computing traditions, where we are analyzing and we're finding these discrete emotions for human experiences, versus when you're looking at these eyes and these micro expressions, when they're processing loss and grief and happiness, there are so much nuances in the eye movements that how can we even capture that rich human experience with words, right? Words become almost clumsy to experience, to describe how is the depth of human emotion. So you're right there. I don't know how we could ever have systems that they show or be able to move away completely from this discrete way of categorizing to something that is more continuous. Now, we have to also reflect on that human brain works with classification and identification. We classify things, right? We're saying that, oh, this group of people are doctors, these are teachers, these are mothers, right? We have these forms of classifications, and yet our computational systems do the same form of classifications. So the problem starts with human and then replicated to our computational systems. It tells us about our limitation of how we are perceiving the reality as discrete elements. But thank you for that brilliant question, because it made me think a lot.
We can't mess up the categories. Just a quick follow-up. That's remind me of Foucault in the introduction of Order of Things, where he quotes Borges on this encyclopedia where they include categories of animals just broke a vase, like these kind of categories that are not usually in our mind, like we can mess them up.
I love that.
Hi, I just want to thank you for coming and giving this lecture. Lecture. I've really enjoyed how you talk about technology not as like a service to optimize life, but to kind of interact with. And to that point, I want to ask you a question. Among the projects you've shown, where did, I guess more focusing on the body architecture that you called it, where would you really point and say that it was successful as like a almost invisible mediator, like trying to genuinely enhance? And when does it get to a point where it starts becoming this second like creature on your shoulder that's existing separate from you and interacting with stimuli that you were also experiencing, I guess?
It varies depending on every project. There were projects that became almost continuity of the human body, like the neuromorphic helmets, that it was actually around the question of where is the boundaries of our body, like where do we end, the environment starts, right? So if you're controlling something outside your mind, can we claim that that object is part of your body? So can you claim architecture can be part of your body? Like these questions was something that I was really fascinated. And some projects, you're right, like for instance, iridescence for the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago was a piece that it was responding completely to outside person. So having said that, it became a feedback loop to a person who's wearing it, because the person who's wearing it, I was thinking a lot about sensory substitution. If her eyes are closed or if she's blind, she can still understand where people are standing because she hears the garment. So it's also really in the tradition of feedback loop. What does it do to your body, and how your action will be different in this feedback loop. But you're right that there are some of the projects that they're directly connected to the inner states of the wearer, and sometimes it was sort of outer layer of the wearer. And some projects, basically their departure points was different. So thank you. You have two.
Just want to thank you, like everyone else, I guess, for sharing this presentation. It was great. I took a lot of notes on it. I have a question for you. It might be a little personal. I don't know if you're going to answer this or not. But since we're on the topic of stories and emotions, what is your story? Like, how did you come to this, and why did you find interest in this? And after this, after that question, how does it feel accomplishing this goal?
How does it feel? Good questions. Wow, what is my story? That's a good one. So I should have mentioned that actually in the beginning. So I studied architecture. I came to US 2011 from Iran to study architecture, Master of Architecture at USC. Then I was very fascinated to continue to explore some of these ideas in a little more. I had these ideas that I wanted to build, so I was looking for a space to be able to do that. And then I did my PhD in interdisciplinary media arts at USC, which was a division in cinema school, at film school in USC. So I end up from architecture department and go to film school. I was also working with Professor Bero Khoshnevis in the engineering department on NASA-funded project. I end up being in this like really strange, weird, sweet spots between different disciplines. And 6 years I was doing my PhD, I was building these projects, and I think the story was really also somehow stories of finding myself through all of this, where I felt that the sort of freedom that I didn't have necessarily, and that freedom came to me through use of technology, actually. So I remember the very first semester I started my instructor, I took an idea to the class. It was this crazy idea about this canopy moving in the city. And my instructor, he said, well, great, go build it. And I was like, oh, well, I went to the workshop and I had no idea how to work with any of those tools, because in my country, which is very wonderful, amazing history, rich poetry, and beautiful culture, yet I realized that it was very male dominant. I didn't know how to hold a drill, let alone to run an industrial robotic arm and work with various tools and machinery. So it was a journey of me finding myself in the workshops, hours, learning various tools and technologies, watching YouTube videos, learning about robotics and blowing microcontrollers and realizing, oh, I'm making mistakes, and just learning through this process and finding my voice through doing things. And that was my story, really. Like, it was when I felt free from what my culture, the environments that I grew up, was trying to confine me, and I was trying to free myself from that. And through learning technology, for me, was that freedom that I was learning, that, okay, I can do these things. I can learn to control the robotic arm, and every tool I was learning, every time I was able to do any of that, I was feeling more free. So I think what is very exciting for where you all are is that you are in that journey. We all are in that journey throughout our life in different stages. But really, the question is, how do you navigate that, and how do you align yourself with that story? Something in you is there, and you have to find it, that what are you looking for? For me, was that freedom that I was trying to break through those sort of, a lot of those cultural and stories and narratives that it was so deeply engraved in me, and I was trying to break through it. And it was very, I still do, and I think that's very wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody to come here.
Thank you all.